Hey guys, I have another devotional for us today. We are in Matthew 8, 18 through 22. Let's go ahead and read it first, and then we'll jump into it, and I'll explain a few things to you from the start here. So it says, verse 18, Now, when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. He's talking about the other side of the lake, the Sea of Galilee, that is. And a scribe came up and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Okay, let's explain this a little bit because it can be kind of hard to understand. The very first person we see here that approaches Jesus is a scribe. A scribe is a teacher of religious law, a rabbi, maybe even one of the Pharisees or Sadducee sect, but a religious leader, a teacher of God's law. And scribes are almost exclusively in the Gospels referred to in negative terms. They are almost always the ones who are causing Jesus problems. And Matthew kind of keeps the theme going. He kind of keeps the theme alive here. Well, the man approaches Jesus, and it's interesting because he calls him teacher. And that's not wrong, right? One of my commentaries says that it's accurate, but it's not adequate. It's an accurate description of who Jesus is, but it is not an adequate description of who Jesus is. The reason I say that is because if you look at the other instances of the people who call Jesus teacher using this word, they're not people who are ready to follow or dedicate themselves to Jesus. They don't believe he is who he's claiming to be. So he starts by calling him teacher, and basically the way you're supposed to understand this is that this scribe is a teacher of religious law, and he's basically coming to Jesus saying, you are also a teacher of religious law. Us, we're samesies, right? We're equal. And he says, I'll follow you wherever you go. I like what you're saying. I'll follow you wherever you go. And with a single statement, Jesus points out this man's overzealous attitude. Jesus says, Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Essentially, how we're to understand this is that Jesus is saying, you say you'll follow me anywhere, but I'm going through difficult and dangerous places. And then without kind of any warning, the tone shifts. And we see the next person, a person who's just called another of the disciples. And the way we're supposed to understand that is just that this is another random follower of Jesus at this point. This is a person who has been following Jesus, who's been listening to his teaching, and who has been intrigued by it, but isn't necessarily on the same footing as like we would think of the 12 disciples or the apostles as they're called, or even one of the later followers of Jesus. He says, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus's response to him is kind of harsh sounding if we don't understand it properly, I think. When Jesus says, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead, he's not saying do not attend the funeral of your father. There's no reason for us to believe that this man's father is actually dead right now. I think what this man is actually saying, and I'm very confident of this, is that this man is just claiming that when my dad dies, I'll come and follow you. When it's more convenient, when I won't tick off the old man. I don't want to upset the apple cart at home, but when he's dead, it'll be okay. I can come and do as I please. That's why Jesus responds the way he does, exposing the nature of his problem by just saying, you follow me and you leave the dead to bury their own dead. What I see in this passage is I see two attitudes that keep people from truly following Jesus. And I think each of these men represents one. The scribe represents what I would call a hasty attitude. He wants to follow Jesus, he says, but he hasn't actually accounted for the fact that Jesus is going places he would never want to go. He is coming to Jesus, and he's making a claim, almost like Peter when Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Before that, he said, I will die with you. I'll die for you. I'm not going to let any harm come to you, Lord. He's making a hasty claim. The second attitude, I think, is a casual attitude. Both, I think, are equally destructive. But what we see here is that people don't treat following Jesus with the level of importance that it needs. Jesus has talked about in other places that anyone who is not willing to give up father, mother, sister, brother, for me, is not worthy of the kingdom of heaven. And in case we didn't understand what Jesus' level of commitment to us is, what we celebrate on Friday, maybe that's today as you're watching this, Good Friday, was the day Jesus allowed himself to be brutalized and murdered so that we could be reconnected to God, so that his torment could bring us peace. There was nothing that he was not willing to go through that we could be reconnected with God. That is the level of commitment that he's bringing forth, and he's asking us for our lives. I see both of these attitudes in the church today, and I think both of them are equally harmful. The first hasty attitude is probably most easily recognized in people who think that following Jesus is going to benefit their life. And there are some real ways where following Jesus benefits your life. I'm not suggesting that being a follower of Jesus doesn't have benefit. That would be silly. But they are so focused on the benefit that they cannot see that at some point it's going to cost you dearly to continue to follow Jesus. And at the moment there is any sort of opposition, they tuck tail and run. They were hasty. They said, I will follow you wherever you go, as long as you heal my diseases, you keep my bank accounts full, and nobody ever comes up against me in any sort of opposition. As long as life is good, I'll follow you. And then we see the casual attitudes of a lot of people in our churches. And I am not trying to expose any person or anything like that, or even be discourteous. But I'm saying that I've seen these attitudes in people, and it keeps us from a real relationship with Jesus. The casual attitude is probably most easily seen in people who go through the rigmarole of going to church on Sunday, and they even read their Bible, and they encourage their friends to pray, and they type up thoughts and prayers when somebody's going through difficult situations on Facebook or what have you. But when it comes down to it, if they are pressed, they're not going to upset the apple cart. They're not going to, and again, I'm not suggesting that you go out of your way to be a jerk, but what I am suggesting is that there will come a time when you cannot be casual about your relationship with Jesus. And it's important for us to truly commit to following him. Billy Graham has been accused by some of what's called easy believism, meaning that he made salvation just way too easy for people to accept. I think that's very discourteous, because this is what he has to say about the Christian life. He says salvation is free, but discipleship costs everything we have. As I said, we celebrate Easter this Sunday. For us to be connected to Jesus literally cost him everything. And he's asking for us to live our lives for him. And I'll say what I've probably said 1,000 times, which isn't original to me. I'm sure I heard it somewhere. But if Jesus is worth anything, he should be worth everything.